I am excited too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. As presenters, everyone in this room, if you're presenting, it's your job to literally capture your audience's attention. Why else would you be there, correct? There's that ongoing discussion of, should I send a presentation ahead for a read ahead? But if you're presenting to someone, you need to capture their attention. So my guess is that in this group, there are not a lot of career presentation designers. As a Microsoft 365 MVP who has received the award in PowerPoint, I know there are not a lot of us. In the group of M365, I know there are not a lot of PowerPoint awardees, but that's why I'm here. In the next 45 minutes, I'm going to give you slide design tips based on the physiological science, not the technical science, the physiological human science that tells us how we can design slides to connect with and compel your audiences to act, to capture their attention. And you don't have to be a designer, believe it or not. Here's what we're looking at. We will go into a couple of studies. There's tons of research in there. Some of mine goes back maybe 20 years, more recently to recently published work, but it covers the gamut. I'm focusing on two specifically. Then we're going to talk about some mistakes that, because we're not following the science, we need to avoid, those pitfalls that we fall into. We're going to take a look at what we should be embracing, the good stuff. And then I'll give you 3 quick steps to more powerful slides, what you can do that doesn't involve working on the computer to create more powerful slides. And then we'll end with some slide makeovers. Now,
hey, Sandra.
Yes.
Sorry, 1 second. It doesn't look like you're presenting.
Oh. I'll try again.
I'm not sure if you started and then it stopped or whatever, but
yep, there we go.
Now we are. We're good. Thank you.
So we missed my cover slide. No big deal. Here's our table of contents. And did everybody was able to follow along there without the slide? I hope. Let's move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, you got it. When we start creating our presentations, whether you're a designer or not, you always ask yourself, who's going to be in the room? When you present presentations, and this is my question to you, who do you typically present to? And feel free to type it in the chat. Speak up, please, Dawn, or if you could tell me if somebody types something and has a question along the way, I'd really appreciate it. But tell me who is typically in your audience. How would you describe that? You know what? That's okay. I'm ready. Colleagues. Okay, colleagues, coworkers, IT leadership, user group attendees. Perfect. And that's very, very normal. This is the demographic kind of approach that we take to presenting, to creating our slides. Those involve a lot of differences. Each of these audience members has unique needs, and clearly we need to address those. But what we often fail to do is to address what humans have in common. Any thoughts? I kind of gave you a hint in how I just said that. They're human. And humans learn in a particular way. Going forward, as you create PowerPoint presentations, I want you to consider the research on human physiology that shows in order for a presentation to be successful, your audience must be able to learn or to retain information. Your PowerPoint audiences are people too. I'm a designer. I don't create presentations just to look pretty, although they end up for the most part looking great. I design my slides based on the science of how people learn in an AV environment, which means standing up in front of an audience on a stage, presenting remotely like we're doing now. And over my 22 years in this business, I relied on three resources, well, numerous resources, but three that I want to share with you today. Cliff Atkinson, Beyond Bullet Points, his book, Richard E. Mayer with the Cambridge Handbook of Multimedia Learning, and Carmen Simon with Made You Look. The first research that I'm going to share with you today that helps me create great slides is the concept of memory. Now, during a presentation, there are three types of memory that we want to take into consideration. There's sensory memory, and that's unlimited. That's what you hear, that's what you see, that's what you smell. You get it, right? It is unlimited and can be overwhelming just by its nature. Long-term memory is where we as presenters, you as presenters, want to move your content to. You want your content to be memorable, stored in long-term memory so people can use that information going forward. Here's the stickler. We've got this thing called working memory. It used to be called short-term memory, but working memory is very, very discerning in what kind of information it moves from your environment to your long-term memory. As a matter of fact, Cliff Atkinson in Beyond Bullet Points describes working memory being so finicky that it's like getting a frayed thread through a needle. Imagine all the stuff around us and how tough it is to get it. Imagine trying to take all that information and narrowing it down to long-term memory. Let's take a look at a slide, for example. That's why we're here. A slide like this. This is a real slide and one that we've all seen in one way or another. When we start with a slide like this, one of three things can happen when it comes to storing into long-term memory. One, there's absolutely no recall. I heard the presenter speak, I saw their slides, I don't remember what they said. Maybe we get some fragmented information because while the presenter was talking, I was able to see some visuals. I do remember, but I really don't remember what the key point was. Or finally, we have retention. We have information that is stored in your memory and can be used and called upon, like the computer, called upon to use whatever you need to going forward. That is the ideal result. So key takeaway from this, the research around memory, clutter limits memory. So that's very simple. That's very basic. You start putting a bunch of bullet points and pictures and diagrams and labels on your slides. That is clutter, and you're going to limit the ability of your content to move through that needle, the eye of that needle, into long-term memory. Any questions about that one? And by the way, feel free to ask questions throughout. I don't mind I prefer being interrupted, by the way. Okay, let's move on to the next concept that I use all the time, and it's the concept of dual channels. People absorb information through that eye of the needle, through verbal channels and visual channels. Verbal is me talking, visual is what you're seeing on the slide. When it works well, we get long-term memory and retention and learning. However, back to this slide, we have a few issues, and let's take a look at it. If we're talking visual, which was the eye, you can see that there are some visual elements on this slide. We've got the computer monitor, we've got the customer service representative, and a lot of people might think, well, text is visual. Text is not visual. Text forces working memory to verbalize the words. meaning I'll point this out. 30% of you that are here today hear the words in your mind while you are reading it. So the logic stands that if you're hearing words in your mind while someone is trying to present to you, you're going to get confused. So technically, it's going through your auditory, it's going through the verbal channel. Both will go through the ears and create overload, will help make your audience become overwhelmed. And we're going to get these two results. Just like I pointed out, that means things are not going to stay in the memory. Oh, thank you for posting the Made You Look book. That's awesome. Oh, all 3 books. That's great. So here's what happens, and this was Richard E. Meyer. When you take, oh, was there a question? I thought I heard something. Meyer says that when you take redundant text, that's the element that overwhelms your audience, and remove it from the slides, memory increases by 28%. But what's even more important is that the people in your audiences will be able to take nearly 80% or make nearly 80% more solutions based on that information they received. So there it is. It's very, very important that you understand that redundancy, that's text on the slide while a presenter is talking, redundancy leads to cognitive overload. And when you choose not to align your presentation approach with dual channels, that is keeping those channels separate, you diminish the effectiveness of your presentation. So those are the 2 sciences that I want to focus on today. What I think is really interesting is how I can show you how to apply that science. And first, let's start with some negatives, things that we should avoid. Error number 1 is loading your slides with bullets. That's not a surprise, right? And please stop me again. So here's a slide of bullet points. What happens by human nature is that the presenter may be perceived as reading the slides. And that is the number 1 complaint worldwide in the business world of PowerPoint presentations specifically. Dave Parody, does an annual research among businesses across the world. Great study. And they tell him, I hate it when the presenter reads the slides. They may not actually be reading the slides, but because you see something like this, that perception is there. The other thing that happens is human nature again. I'm in the audience. I start reading it. I can't listen. That's redundancy. So let's go about taking it off. Eric, it looks like every slide I've ever seen or made. Well, we're going to get you over that. Okay, so first, I ask my clients, what's the purpose of your slide? What message do you want to get across? And they ask themselves that, and they say, well, I'm not a good enough designer. I need to present just the notes. Okay, let's remove all this extra stuff, put it in our speaker notes. You know, that's at the bottom of this, it's in the notes pane, and use those notes. I have a hack too, where you can export these notes, well, to Word. It's not really a hack, it's just a feature of PowerPoint. Export those notes to Word, you get a side-by-side comparison, and it allows you to practice and become prepared for a slide that's just like this. Tons of white space, not necessarily pretty, but you know what? The key message is getting across. I'm avoiding information overload by using notes instead of slide text. I'm limiting bullet points, and I'm limiting the number of words per bullet point. You can listen to me while I'm saying that. You don't have to read through all that text. So this first one's easy. If you must use bullet points, limit the bullet points, limit your slide to 3 to 5 bullets, and each bullet to 3 to 5 words. I know there are people out there who would die that I'm even including this in the presentation. I see a question. Are you intentionally leaving the bullet off? I notice there's no bullet symbol in front of each line. Is that the previous slide? Yes. Nothing says PowerPoint like bullet points. I've got spacing between each line that separate the thought. That is sufficient. I think bullet points are a habit that is difficult to get rid of. So Michael, yes, I did do that on purpose. And 3 to 5 bullets, 3 to 5 words. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can work with this, maybe becoming a little bit more graphic. That was a simple bullet only approach. Now we've got a slide that comes to us, and it's called Scope Considerations. It kind of follows the rules that I gave. There's only 4 bullet points, but the text is a little lengthy. I can't really, I'm going to be busy reading it. So the easiest thing we can do is probably boldface the headers. I'm calling those headers at this point, the key points that hopefully your audience will follow along while you are perceived potentially as reading the rest of the content. Some people will argue, I have to have it on there. I'm not a professional presenter. I have to have the text on there. This is another step toward making that a little easier for you to use. Or we can use SmartArt. That's taking that text, hitting a button. This is called, oh gosh, I can't remember if this is the list option, but this is the next option, which breaks out the headers, and then it minimizes the supporting text. In my mind, this is the next level to helping your audience just follow along as you, as a content expert, talk about assumptions, exclusions, constraints, and interdependencies. Now, here's a next approach. What to consider when it comes to scope. Now we're completely graphic, and I'm going to control the flow of the story by bringing in and talking about assumptions and the supporting information for that. As the content expert, this is what I can control that. Notice I'm using animation. When I first started in this business 22 years ago, animation was being abused. A lot of us have very much limited the use of animation in our presentations because of that bad name. But this most recent research is telling us that we need to change something, whether it's our tone of voice, a movement on the chart, on the slide, color. We need to change something. It's either 38 or 48 seconds. So it's not taking in bullets and have things flying in and being, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about providing the information to keep people's attention. Okay, I see a question here. Why do you not animate the individual icons as well as the text? I am referring to the practice of giving kind of the big picture. And there's also this notion called priming. You are setting up, creating some sort of intrigue that something's going to follow. So by just having the graphics there, you're waiting for some point of clarification. And then I brought in the assumptions, exclusions, constraints, and interdependencies. It depends on the story, perhaps, that you're trying to tell, how you want to do that. This is my recommendation for now, but I may say, nope, for such and such an audience, we need to bring all of that in. And you as a presenter need to guide, either with a pointer or with your voice, guide them across, starting with assumptions. Next, exclusions will do this, and constraint, and finally, interdependencies. There are ways for you to pull people across the slide. It does not have to be animated, but that priming includes words like next. Let's start with just changing your tone to help people follow you throughout the slide. Any questions about, any more questions? I love the questions coming in. Okay. So let's talk about chart junk. This is an old one. This is from a gentleman named Edward Tufte. He made this popular in the, I think it was 93. And he actually, in his book, oh shoot, of course it failed me right now, it's pamphlet, he blames PowerPoint for bringing down the space shuttle. He made a good point. The slides are pretty bad, but to be honest, that mistake could have been made using Keynote or Google Slides or whatever. But here's an example of chart junk. And now I want everyone here to prepare themselves to give me answers. I want you to tell me what we could do to make this chart better. Better being removing chart junk. What would you do? And if you can, just turn on your mic and let me know. Okay. Flatten the bars, get rid of the grid lines, add scale, legend. Oh my gosh, that's everything. That's everything I would do. The 3D, and I think that's what you meant by flatten it. That is so, what's the word I want for that? It's misleading. It's misleading because by its nature, 3D makes the number look higher. So this is where we came. Nursing home costs steadily increasing. And here we have nice flat bar charts or column charts. The data is in line. Every time you can put the data in line when you're visualizing data, that is the best solution. Having that habitual virtual axis over here and no numbers here is kind of like that tennis kind of approach. Okay, let me look at the axis, and now let me figure out how the number is fitting in. Both is clutter. This is the best approach. So when it comes to visualizing data, less clearly is more. You know, you don't even have to, I often will ask myself, do I have to have a chart? Can I answer this in any other way? Well, maybe we want to just celebrate the 2006 $75,000 results. And I can make a big graphic in the middle of the slide, put $75,000, and that wouldn't be a celebration, by the way, if we're talking about nursing home. But my point is, we don't always have to show charts in data visualization. The next one the next error I call free for all. And here is a slide where we've used data visualization. We're using text over a supporting pie chart, and that's not a bad idea, but things are not aligned very well. So I, as a designer, work on a grid. People in graphic design, in print graphic design, web design, always use grids. We tend to forget about that when it comes to PowerPoint. You can set it up using grid lines in PowerPoint, and I do that too. But you can see here that we are not on a grid. Things are going into the margins. They're not level. We've got some text is thicker than others. So I took a look at it and I put it on a grid first. I, in my own way, tried to shorten the text to make it more consistent. As presentation creators, you should also allow yourself to become a good copy editor, because that is so important to the success of the presentation. Here we have an insightful headline: rural population drives the need for telehealth, where previously we just had the header telehealth that tells us absolutely nothing. So I rewrote the headline, talked about the need for telehealth, adjusted the call outs to be consistent, and replaced some of the information with Latin. So this is how it looks on the grid. There are many, many grid types. This was the grid for this client. So the takeaway, to get away from chart junk, mistake number 2 is to work on a grid. If that is too overwhelming, don't write in the margins. Think about that. Even if you start with a Microsoft Office template, you already have margins established because the title header is positioned and those edges create the margin. The edges of the, bounding box create the margins. So use your margins. You'll go a long way to becoming more professional. Great suggestion. Don't forget about the arrange panel. I have that in my quick access toolbar. Do you guys use a quick access toolbar? It's just a way to put your most common used elements into a more accessible position. Yes, way to go. Okay. I'll have to check on the font when we close. I can't remember. I'll let you know, Dawn. So let's look at some rules for success. Let's be a little bit more positive. Rule number 1 is to tell a story. You hear that all the time, telling stories, but that can mean different things. So I want to give you some practical approaches to telling a story. First, there's the concept of purpose. What's the purpose of your presentation and each slide? What's the purpose of that slide? For example, if you say, oh, I don't expect people to read this slide, it's just there, then it has no purpose. Take it out. Ask yourself purpose from presentation to slide to element to slide element. Next is the concept of relevance. So we know what the purpose is. We know now that we know who's in the audience. So we need to make the presentation, each and every slide, each and every object on the slides relevant. We need to answer the question, what's in it for me? And that varies. Maybe you are presenting to a technology group, you're informing them, or maybe you're trying to get money for the next project from the CTO. Understand that difference and how they need to be presented to. The next is presentation structure, and there's a lot around that. I've kept it very, very simple for our presentation, and I'm going to go into this in a little bit. There's the concept of a hook. How many presentations have you seen that have the title, Sales Capabilities, ABC Companies Sales Capabilities? That does not get me excited. We need a hook. We need to prime our audience. We need to intrigue them, wanting more information, being excited to see the next slide. And then finally, there's delivery. Let's go into each of these. I think, yes, there we go. Here's an example of a chart that I received from a client quite a while ago, but it's just an amazing example of not understanding what the purpose of the slide is. So because I couldn't connect with my client, I normally ask them, what is the purpose? But I couldn't connect. So I guessed at multiple different approaches. Well, does our call volume vary by month? Well, then let's simplify it. Let's take out all the grid lines and all the extra colors and everything, and let's talk about that volume difference. That's one kind of purpose. What if the purpose is to demonstrate a steady climb in call volume trend? Well, okay, so now we have the inbound calls. On click, we can add a trend line to show the success that we're achieving. How about we want to demonstrate that inbound call volume varies by season? Let's do it. Let's show them what January, February numbers are, March, April numbers, May, June. Pretty simple by just putting a nice light shading behind there. Or maybe we want to demonstrate that it's quarterly campaigns that drive our call volume. You know what? We're in marketing, and we've had 3 campaigns so far this year, and these are the numbers associated with each quarter. Any questions about purpose? Okay, now let's talk about relevance. I mentioned earlier the idea that there might be a decision maker in your audience, a decision maker that's going to give you funding, release funding for your next effort. In this case, it's a marketing one, a marketing effort. And we're talking about the call volume by quarter and how the marketing campaign that we released in Q3 was the most successful. We want to emulate that creative. And next quarter, or next year, we want to launch a campaign that's based on that creative, based on that messaging, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's one way to show that decision maker that, yes, we do want Q3 numbers, but here's another way to show it. Why don't we go into Q3 and demonstrate the creative that we that we tested, and we averaged the highest number of calls, and could you please fund us for moving forward with this similar style and strategy for the next year? You can see how we made that very relevant to the audience. The creative is very relevant. Structure, like I said, I kept it very simple. I've mentioned priming a couple of times. And one way to do that is with your agenda and repeating the section slides over and over so that your audience is moving from one concept to the next, but also creating intrigue so that they want to know what's important about, I'll go back to this. What's important about chart junk, loading with bullets. What are you going to tell me about that? Creating that intrigue. What's a free-for-all? You know, what is a free-for-all? So structure is so important, and using this concept here is very, very helpful. Hook is one of my favorites. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a hook. It's the what if approach. What if we could save time and money and increase collaboration? What if we could harness the power of chatbots to provide our customers with accurate information to more naturally, quickly, and efficiently, and save millions of dollars each year? I think something was missing from that, but that's the what if. What if we could do this and save millions of dollars each year? Wow, yeah, tell me how we can do that. That's the answer to that question. This approach on these slides can be a little confusing. Here's a simple way to do it. This slide is a real slide, and we have that headline, that presentation title, Conversational AI Platform Overview. 99% of the presentations I work with start with that kind of headline. There is no intrigue in that whatsoever. Something like this, harnessing the power of chatbots with the conversational AI platform, makes me a little more interested in what I have to learn. Also, that gives me the venue to now position myself as the content expert. And I can say the words, what if we could harness the power of chatbots and conversational AI to provide accurate information more naturally and quickly for the company this year? The conversational platform underlying core technologies create, deliver, and host a variety of virtual assistant solutions quickly. Now I can talk to that and be the content expert. That's a hook. That's priming your audience also. And then finally, delivery. It's practice, practice, practice. I've had many clients come to me and ask me for slides that look like Steve Jobs slides. He has a visual and he has some text next to it. He practiced hundreds of hours to deliver for each presentation, to deliver these presentations. So yes, this is absolutely the best way, the combination of visual, there is no text interfering, creating cognitive overload. Your eyes are focused on, or your ears are focused on listening to what he has to say and perhaps looking at his face and the slide. But he couldn't do this if he didn't practice like he did. So that is telling a story. And the reason you tell stories is because you have to emotionally connect. Emotionally, and I'm not saying crying, laughing, whatever. It could be connecting to the intellect, connecting to their desire for increasing profits. You have to connect with your audience to compel them to act in the way that you want. If you remember anything today, I want you to remember this one. I think it's going to help you a lot. It's, well, one concept per slide. That's the first thing I did as I started creating presentations 22 years ago. Here's an example presentation. It's not bad. It kind of follows the rules that I set up early. We have 1,800 hospitals in the study. We have 27 states. There's medication management errors. There's been staff reductions. When I asked the client about this, they said they spent 10 minutes on this slide. In the 21st century, when you are presenting in a virtual environment, you cannot spend 10 minutes on a slide because pretty soon, and I've done this personally, you're in the chat and you're going, is the slide frozen? Or you turn off your mic, hey, is the slide, I think something's broken. You can't do that. You have to keep moving. Again, 38 or 48 seconds of change is necessary. So let's take a look at what I suggested, which was to create an entire section of a presentation. We're calling this, oh, there's a typo there, and I did change it once, but it didn't stay. I apologize. So uncovering medication error causes in the United States, research, methods, and results. First, we were trying to figure out why there was a 20% increase in med errors. So we reached out to, we traveled to numerous states to meet with facilities across the country and accessed 1,800 hospitals. These are 3 different slides. We had bullet points, but now I'm going maybe more quickly, but I'm really sorry. Can you hear my dog? I'm sorry. Okay. These are each a bullet point. Now you can stay on this for 38, 48 seconds and talk about it, and then move to the next bullet point and talk about it. But we're keeping the audience following along and intrigued. Here's an interesting one. We uncovered a 14% staff reduction countrywide. This one really tells the story and shows visually that we have a 14%. We're running shorter across the country in help. This is better than showing a column chart, for example. And then finally, using a visual anchor. This what I've just been using, that's the concept of a visual anchor. It's the key graphic and the headline, the insightful headline that is not a label, not a chart that says 2024 sales. It says respondents represented 23 different states. And now the audience can look at the 23 different states and you can talk about it. Visual anchor. So those are the good, the bad and the good of some tips and tricks that you can use to overcome the bad and the good. Any questions? Are we doing on time? Yes, we're fine. Okay, let's talk about 3 steps to more powerful slides. The first is, and they don't, by the way, these don't involve creating your slides in PowerPoint yet. This is the other bit of science that tells us when you write something down, you remember information more. You become emotionally attached to it. So what we recommend first is that we write your script. Now, I don't mean script like you're going to memorize something. I mean the full story so that you understand the full story. It's the opposite of the outline concept, really. You start with the full story, then you pull out the key concepts and you write a headline for each concept on each slide. By the way, I used another little bit of science that shows us that when you annotate your slides, I just did that here, that's one of those 38-second motions that help people wake up and follow along. So I started with this and I said, then write a headline for each concept per slide. Then take each slide in your slide sorter if you're in PowerPoint. I know this is hard to do in the 21st century. I don't think any one of us has printers anymore. But think about this. You could print these out, put them on a wall, then move it around so that the flow of your story is stronger. I do this with court cases all the time. I'll have the lawyers will brainstorm and I'll be writing headlines on Post-it notes. Right. And then we put them all up and we look at the big story and we start moving things around. So it just helps with being creative. The next thing we do is we draw our anchor, that visual anchor. And by drawing, this isn't the point where you say, I can't draw. This is the point where you sketch out what would be the best solution. If you were in PowerPoint and you were creating this, you would say, well, I don't know how to create charts. I don't want to put a chart there. Then you might put a silly photo in instead when a chart would have been better. This will allow you to overcome any limitations you think you have in creating a PowerPoint presentation. We have the headlines, we've moved them around, we start drawing sketches. Then find it. I want a picture of a person. I want to build a chart. I want a picture of a street and buildings. I want a picture of a person standing next to a tree, etc. Now you can start to look, you've got the story down, and always close with your brand, whether it's a logo or your signature or contact information. It's a great place for people to do the Q&A. Now I'm going to move into Michael Blumenthal's amazing slides that he sent to me. I really am grateful. Not everyone is comfortable doing that. Michael, is there anything you want to say to us, tell us before I get started on this? We did not have time to talk, everyone, just so you know. So I did this really 100% from a design standpoint.
Nothing other than provide some context of this is a presentation I gave to a community, an M365 community group. It was earlier this year.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually earlier this year. And that's recorded, and I'll put the recording in the chat at some point here. But
Awesome.
Go ahead. I'm looking forward to your feedback and changes.
I didn't do all of them. I picked I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but I provided multiple options for you. Okay, so this was the slide, the first slide that I worked on. And one of the first things I did was check to see if it's on a grid. Not bad. You can see that by default, the PowerPoint, it looks like you used a Microsoft PowerPoint template, and we're using our margins pretty well on the left. The right side, not so much. And then remember that things to avoid concept of free-for-all? While this is neat and tidy, the free-for-all is that we have our copy very much separated from our image. So I created this slide. Now notice it's on the grid. We're using the margins. I did some overlap, and because I didn't understand what you were saying, what the purpose of your slide was, I designed this to say, okay, well, we've got 2 bullet points. Let's talk about the weekly email and third-party options as 2 alternatives to using Planner. That's one way that we could do that. So here's the before and here's the after.
I like how the putting the one right next to almost right next to where the email address is connects it better.
Good. We could be even more intentional about that. And so I know that I didn't quite understand when I show you the next option, but the other thing about this is it's unexpected to overlap the content. The picture with the numbers over it ties it all together. It is unexpected and more likely to be remembered. One thing I wanted to comment on, and I think I can do this in this next one, is blowing out. I see it, primary email address. I didn't realize that this was the one we were supposed to call out. So this is my bad. But what I wanted to do here was to demonstrate how you can call out information. Because this is a lower resolution image, I literally recreated in as close as possible the line that I was trying to blow out. And so that's another way to show your audience the details in that screenshot that you have. Then I can call out remember the bullet points that were underneath the second? And again, it don't make sense, but I'm using that annotation concept, at least one ISV / services vendors.
And
go ahead.
I could have, and the reason I don't have like a screenshot of the third-party vendors product, which was the other alternative, is because I wasn't in a environment or it wouldn't have been appropriate to promote them in this for this audience.
Got it. Okay, understood. 100%. But you could have possibly blown that first check mark out, I should say. This one, right?
Yep.
That I'm circling, yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this would have been more appropriate up there.
I mean, that would have worked really well for me.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. Okay, and here's the next one. We're right on schedule. Okay, so here's related resources. And I love that logo. That is so fun. I liked it so much that I misunderstood and I thought, oh, this was your brand logo. So I used it predominantly in my first option. But here we've got the message center show, maturity model, and slide share. And then we've got this was hyperlinked text in the original. It's not here, but we would hyperlink to it. Now, question for you, Michael. Do you leave the PowerPoint presentation and go to this? Or is it just for demonstration?
This was more, let's see. So in this presentation, I had tight time constraints of under 15 minutes. So I don't think I would have, I mean, I might have clicked on these. If I had time, I might have clicked on these to show, okay, here, it opens a browser, goes to the YouTube page. Hey, this is the Message Center show. You should give a listen. This is Maturity Model. Oh, look, we're on learn.microsoft.com. click on SlideShare. Here's my archive of slides on SlideShare. I wouldn't necessarily have gone into any of those in further depth.
Got it.
It could also have just been as a leave behind.
Excellent. Okay. And I thought that given that these were little to read and everything, I thought, let's just focus. Well, I did adjust the grid situation. And this was me misunderstanding the logo, but what I did here was now you can just focus on the message center show, the maturity model show, SlideShare. The audience can see those clearly and not be distracted by the small hyperlink text. However, should someone have a question for you, you can go to any one of those links. I've added the hyperlinks to the buttons so that you can access it as needed. It's a dynamic presentation. It's a dynamic slide. You get certain kinds of questions. You can answer them by clicking on a button. Of course, this was meant, everyone, just for the message center show. So that's why I created this next slide where we've got the 3 buttons that can be clicked on, and headers that are subheaders that are readable, and then graphic that represents each of the hyperlinks.
So a question I have a question about this one in particular, the one in the middle, the maturity model.
Yeah.
That is I would my first instinct might be to use a screenshot of the web page that is the landing page for the maturity model. It is a very text heavy page. So maybe that isn't such a good idea, but I would want something that the particular iconography used there is kind of meaningless. But I guess what I'm asking for is guidance between, would it be I think the reason not to do a screenshot of the web page is because it would be very text heavy. But in the case, since it's maturity level and maturity model, which is a 5-tier model, maybe some sort of 5-tier pyramid block structure, something very simple graphics would be better than using the screenshot, which had a lot of text in it. Correct?
Excellent. See, and I love PowerPoint is such an awesome collaboration tool. And I love preparing a slide like this to give people ideas and they go, yeah, that works, but can we change this? I think that's a great idea. And we'd move that out. And of course, I picked this up. I don't think I picked this up from Microsoft Icons, PowerPoint icons. I use a resource called the Noun Project. It's $40 a year for unlimited use of icons. And they're recolorable, editable. You don't have to use PNGs. They're vector graphics. I highly recommend it. Okay, that's great. I love it. And then I did this. Let's say you wanted just to talk about them. You don't want to use 3 different graphics. Well, let's give people, you talk about it. We do this. Then there's the maturity model and there's a slide share, and let people visit it themselves. That's one thing to do. By the way, the presentations that you show on SlideShare are awesome. I recommend that everyone visit it. I did check it out, and I loved them. They really did follow a lot of the science that.
I tried.
That's very great. Okay, so that's it for the day. I talked about storyboards. I talked about the 3 steps and drawing out your concepts before you start playing with your slides so that you can tell the story better, so that you are not limited by PowerPoint. And I have available a full page 8.5 by 11 storyboard, and you can scribble on it. You can use annotations in PDF to do that. You don't have to print it out or anything. And there's a 6-up storyboard that just allows you more work on one page. And that's it. And I'm 1 minute over. Visit my website if you want to learn more there. I am on LinkedIn as Sandra Johnson, PowerPoint MVP. I have a twice monthly presentation podcast, surprisingly called The Presentation Podcast. I with 2 other MVPs, that's Troy Collar and Nolan Hames. And I am a past co-founder of the Presentation Guild. If you want to check the Guild out and you want to learn more, hang out with other presentation experts and learn more about what you can do, I strongly suggest that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I learned a lot. And everybody, be sure to check out the Noun Project. Check out all of Sandra's information. This has been really, really enlightening. So thank you so much for sharing today.
My pleasure.